How did your experience of co-parenting change your perspective on motherhood and self-worth?
So my experiencing with co-parenting was definitely a journey of self-discovery and I guess self-love too. Like I said, I realized after going through a lot of coaching, I'd say more coaching than therapy, but just mindset coaching, realizing how much I was tying that worth or that percentage of paper to my worth, and not only just that, but how I was focusing so much on lack, and so instead of focusing on abundance. And going through this now, I can look back and say what a blessing it was, and how that time of trial and how I felt like I was at rock bottom really was laying the foundation for so much learning about myself, but then also so much blessing ahead of coming into who I was and realizing that my worth doesn't come from anything outside of me. It doesn't come from a person. It doesn't come from a piece of paper. It doesn't come from anything. It comes from the inside.
Welcome to Single Parent Success Stories, a podcast designed to inspire single parents. Here you'll find resources from self-care to finances to parenting and everything in between. Discover what it takes to thrive. Let the stories inspire you to what is possible. Before we start the next conversation, I want to invite you to check out my amazing book, The Gift Inside, a powerful guide for healing your body, mind, and soul. Reclaim your strengths and awaken your true potential. Whether you are navigating heartbreak or simply seeking deeper fulfillment, this book offers the tools to turn your struggles into triumphs. It is time to unlock the gift within you. Available now on Amazon, or you can check it out on my website www.irinashehovtsov.com.
Hello and welcome to Single Parent Success Stories. Today we have a special guest, Lisa McGregor. She is a single mom of one from Sacramento, California. She has been single parenting for 8 years, and her mission now is to help women clear the clutter in their bodies and surroundings so that they can see clearly, regain balance, and live with a renewed sense of purpose and excitement for the future. Welcome, Lisa. It is a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me on today.
Yeah. So please share who you are in your own words.
Yeah, so I got divorced in 2017 and have been single parenting since. Initially, when the divorce did happen, of course, it's a big life change. You're separating years of being together, of family, of everything. And although it was initially my decision to end the marriage for many reasons, it doesn't make it any less painful. And one of the most painful parts of the divorce for me was adjusting to the single parenting and to doing the 50-50. I'm sure as many women can relate, when you are used to seeing your child every single day and being there for school pickups and drop-offs, it's really hard to go to seeing them only 50% of the time. And so that was something that I had a really hard time adjusting to. Fast forward a few years later, the pandemic hit, and there was a lot of changes that happened within my life. I ended up having to move back to my parents' house, and at that time, my daughter went to go live with her father full-time. And that was something that not only did I have a hard time with, but ended up being a giant blessing in disguise, which I'll get into a little bit more. Fast forward now to 2024, and I actually have full custody of her. And so I go into all of that to explain that in the last 8 years, it has been a roller coaster ride of all different types of custody and adjusting to all of that. But there was lessons to be learned in every step of the way.
Totally. What were some of the things you struggled with when you became a single parent?
Well, one of the things I look back on in hindsight now is realizing the meaning that I was attaching to the time that I did not have her. So, for instance, when things get labeled in the courts, it's 50-50, 80-20. They do that number on paper. And I was realizing that I was attaching my worth to that number on that paper. So when it was saying 50-50, I was making that mean that I was only 50% mom, or I was only 50% woman. And I had all these definitions in my head of what a mother should be or what a woman should be. And I was attaching my identity to that. And that was making me drown. And that was making me lose confidence when I did have her. And I was living in such a lack mindset that it really affected my whole life. And it did affect me when I was at 50-50, but when my daughter went to go live with her father full time, that's when I really got real with what what I was making that mean, and realizing that my worth wasn't tied to it. So during that time, as painful as it was, I realized that I needed to detach myself from that and find my worth in who I was, and not the percentage of paper, the percentage of time on paper that was written down. So I got really real with that and realized that I found my worth in who I was. But then as far as the time with her, I looked at the quality time versus the quantity. And I made that relationship really special and made the most of it, and saw how this was actually a gift, and how I was able to heal myself, get real with some of these stories so I could show up for her the best way possible. And
Thank
little
you.
did I know it at the time, it was God preparing me for what was ahead, which was for her to come live with me full time. And it's been that way for almost 2 years now.
Thank you. Thank you. What do you wish you knew at time of struggle?
Oh, there's so many things. I think just the biggest lesson that I did learn, which was that regardless of what's happened in your life, and if you're sharing custody with the other parent, to kind of take you out of the equation and look at it that it's, number one, your worth is not tied to the percentage of time that you have your children. And then secondly, that it's not necessarily your time or the other parent's time. It's really about the child. It's the child's time. And so the times that I was away from her, I wish I would have viewed it more of, this is time to recharge my batteries. And so that way I could show up as the most present parent that I can be. And it really truly comes down to that it's about the quality, not the quantity, that really matters. And I wish I would have made the most of that time versus sitting there sulking in my own misery the time that I didn't have her, focusing on that I didn't have her.
Yeah, you're so right. What role did holistic health play in your healing journey after divorce, and how does it help you cope with the stresses of co-parenting?
Yeah, so I've actually have been in the health and fitness industry for over 20 years. While I was married, I was teaching exercise classes, doing personal training, and so I've been in that world for a really long time. But it wasn't until the last few years, specifically since the pandemic, that I really started diving more into holistic wellness, understanding my foods, and understanding what an important role simplicity plays in your body's overall ability to function, as well as just the toxins around me. And I realized that environment plays such a huge role in your cognitive function. So the time when I was really struggling with the self-worth and being able to like calm myself and see things more clearly, I was realizing, now that I've understood what a role all those other things play, that my cognitive function and my ability to see clearly were clouded by some of those things. And so simple things like not just cleaning up my diet. We all know that eating processed food isn't good, but bringing it down just to real basics of organic food and cooking my own meals, and then also cleaning up my environment of the household products around my house, and makeup products, things like that, that all have chemicals in them that are endocrine disruptors that are shown to interfere with not only cognitive function, but then also thyroid and hormone balance. And as we know, hormone and thyroid run your entire body. And so when you aren't thinking, or when your body isn't functioning properly from a chemical standpoint, it really does affect your body's ability to see clearly and to be able to think clearly and be more rational.
Yeah. What helped you along in your healing journey? Did you have a coach, a community, books you read that helped kind of inspire you to keep moving forward and discovering this more about yourself and about holistic wellness?
Yes. So when we first met, I told you how much I love your podcast, because this is the kind of podcast I wish existed when I first started going through this 8 years ago. When I first went through it, I was desperately seeking someone who not only had been through it, but had been past the worst of it and was thriving. And maybe I just wasn't looking in the right places, but I kind of feel like even just 8 years ago, there really wasn't a lot of this that now exists today. And it's so beautiful to see that there's so much support, from Facebook groups to podcasts to all of this. And this is the stuff that I wish that I had. And so the biggest role at the time was I did have a coach who did help me with some of the mindset. And although it was really good to slow down and to rethink my thoughts, now understanding the whole holistic side of it and understanding how chemicals, food, all of those things play a role in the ability to think clearly, makes me understand why I was having such a hard time grasping it at the time. It was really hard for me to really let it sink in, and for me to have that become my default. And so I'm understanding how those things played a role in my ability to think clearly.
Yeah, you're so right. Like back 8 years ago, when I became a single parent 10 years ago, there was nothing even closely related to that. I guess in my immediate community, everybody was happy together and married. I was this weird outlier who were on a mission, like to discover what is normal, what normal is. And I wasn't finding anything. And that's how this podcast was born. I didn't consider myself like a parent expert. So I wanted to speak to people who already, like you said, been there, done that, and can share their story to inspire and to help. Because there is a lot of stigma, I think, when it comes to single parenting, like broken family and things like that. But there are also success stories, and I wanted to learn from people, who have been there, not necessarily like having a business in the end of it, but who feel happy of how their life turned out, who are happy with how the kids are turning out. So that was the kind of how it all started back. It was only 4.5 years ago when the podcast started. So thank you.
Well, I love that. And quite frankly, I know I love hearing from stories of people that I can feel I can relate to. Of course, it's great to hear from parenting experts or someone who's a therapist who specializes in that. But to me, what always resonates more is talking with someone who is just like me, where I can see myself in them, and just hearing from their journey, that gives me more inspiration personally than someone who's an expert. So I'm glad that you went first and that you stepped up to do this. This is very much needed.
I mean, experts are great, but they only went to school for it. They don't have real life experience. Like I could never understand how a therapist who is happily married, have everything together, can understand how I'm feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, in theory, this is what happens. This is how you're supposed to feel, and we go through stages of grief and things like that. But physically, really, in like what happened, what took place, and how you could be experiencing, like I couldn't relate to that. And I'm not saying therapists are bad. It's always great to get, like, we have this so much emotion and experiences that we want to get off our chest. And yeah, you will feel good in the moment when you are pouring out. But in the end of the day, after you leave your session, you still come back to your life. You still come back to everything you have. And this didn't go anywhere. It just was conversation.
Exactly. Yes. 100%. And I am, yes, I'm glad that you have this and you interview people who are past the worst of it and have the success stories, but you can also relate to very deeply because people can hear their stories and say, that sounds like me, and she made it or he made it, I can do it too.
Yeah. How did your experience of co-parenting change your perspective on motherhood and self-worth?
So my experiencing with co-parenting was definitely a journey of self-discovery and I guess self-love too. Like I said, I realized after going through a lot of coaching, I'd say more coaching than therapy, but just mindset coaching, realizing how much I was tying that worth or that percentage of paper to my worth. And not only just that, but how I was focusing so much on lack. And so instead of focusing on abundance and going through this, now I can look back and say, what a blessing it was, and how that time of trial and how I felt like I was at rock bottom really was a, laying the foundation for so much learning about myself, but then also so much blessing ahead of coming into who I was and realizing that my worth doesn't come from anything outside of me. It doesn't come from a person. It doesn't come from a piece of paper. It doesn't come from anything. It comes from the inside. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned through this co-parenting journey is that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very well said. It's all on the inside. In the co-parenting, Heikelt, what can you recommend to single moms or single parents who are in the co-parenting relationships? What works? What did you find beneficial in your experience in this journey?
So one of the biggest things that I find after talking to a lot of women who have been there as well is they struggle with the other house doing things differently than they do. And so when their kids go to their house, how do they handle going to the other person's house? And then when the kids come back, how you can create that stability. And that was something that I struggled with as well. And I would say my advice to that is to, as much as you can, focus on your environment and just being that safe place and consistent place for your children to land. So things may be a little bit different in dad's house. There may be some inconsistencies, but when they come to your house, make sure that there's that consistency. They always know that they're loved. And that comes from the time apart from them. The time apart, if you look at that and you detach your worth from that and you realize that actually it's a hidden blessing in disguise when you do have that time apart, use that time to recharge yourself and rediscover who you are. Because I've realized that not only quality over quantity, but then also as women, we have a really hard time pouring into ourselves and doing things for ourselves out of selfishness, right? Where we feel like selfish for doing it. Oh, I can't do that. I want to put my kids first. And of course, putting your kids first, that's what parenting is all about. However, putting yourself first is one of the biggest gifts that you can give to your children. And in a co-parenting situation where you may not have your children all the time, instead of sitting around and focusing on the time you don't have them, which is what I did for the first couple of years, made that mistake. Instead, look at it as time to rediscover who you are. What are some of the hobbies and some of the things that you used to do prior to having children? Did you like to dance? Did you like to play tennis or pickleball or something, or maybe reconnect with some old friends? And what are the things that fill your cup the most? And that way, when you aren't with your children, try to fit that time in. Try to fit in some of that time to rediscover who you are, pick up some of those side hobbies so your cup is really full. Then when your children come back, you have that bandwidth and you have that capacity to be able to show up for them in the way that they need. And then also when you do, you have that focused time where it can be quality and you focus on the quality versus the quantity. And that is something that it took me a really, really long time to grasp. But once I did, I began to see like, oh, wow, this time apart actually is a blessing.
Yeah, totally. Now you said that, Heikolt, you have full custody of your daughter. So how do you fill your cup now that she is with you?
Yeah, it's so interesting how life twists and turns. And I realize now I look back and I see how God was preparing me all along for this time. But I needed to kind of get real with some of these stories and heal myself first before I could step into this role. Thankfully, my daughter is 16, so she's pretty self-sufficient now, and to the point where sometimes I'm like, "Do you need me? Are you sure you don't need me?" But but uh, but I do make sure that I still do that. Again, being that she's 16, she kind of has some of her own stuff going on, so thankfully, I'm able to still make time for um, filling my own cup with, like, for instance, I've been with my boyfriend for 5 years. We do not live together, but we do spend time together um, throughout the week and, occasionally. So spending time with him and then exercising, making sure I'm doing exercise, meditation, and then of course I work full time as well. And I'm in a role that I absolutely love. Work isn't work to me; it's passion. So that's something that I actually fills my cup quite a bit going to work.
Awesome, awesome. What is something you can't live without that fills your cup like on a daily basis? What is a non-negotiable for you?
So non-negotiable for me is meditation. That is something that I have found that if I am not doing some form of meditation, and I think that for a long time, and I know other people can probably relate to this, they put this, well, I don't have time for it because they think that it means something. So meditation must mean I must do 15, 20 minutes or whatever they have in their head. And I know I've gotten caught in that myself. Something as simple as 5 minutes or even less of just closing your eyes, getting in touch with your body, taking some deep breaths, calming your nervous system down. It doesn't have to be a really, really long, drawn out thing. I've realized that again, it's quality over quantity. It's not about the amount of time spent, it's the quality time that you do spend. And so I've learned with myself, something as simple as 5 minutes makes a profound difference and really can set the tone for my day. And even if I need to, I've learned that I can even do it midday or even at the end of the day. But that is something that is an absolute non-negotiable for me.
Yeah, totally. I call meditation the inner shower of the mind. We only kind of wash our body, but we forget to wash our brain.
I
And I'm not
like
saying
that.
brain washing, how like a bad connotation, but kind of showering your mind with this
Oh my
calm,
gosh, I'm going to use that one.
positive
That's really
thoughts.
good.
Yeah, awesome. What do you think is the most important trait to instill in a child?
To instill in a child.
Yes.
So the sense of love and stability. I know we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. A lot of parents will worry about maybe things being different in the other house and trying to control that aspect. But children just really need, at the end of the day, they need love, steady love, and consistency. And so the more that you can provide that and just show them that no matter what's going on in the world, whatever is going on in another house, they have that consistent, steady love with you. And as much as you can provide consistency in your home, the better. So consistency with like routine, with, going, if you wake up at a certain time, if you eat dinner together, if there's like maybe a bedtime routine you have, keeping that stability as much as possible.
Yeah, yeah, you're so right. Yeah, in the end of the day, kids just want to feel loved. It's not about the gifts we give them, but I guess the gift of time is the most precious gift that we could give in the fast, society, fast-paced living. That's the most important thing.
It's really true. I actually heard a saying a while ago. It was specifically about Christmas and Christmas presents. And it said, think back to when you were a kid. Do you remember the toys that you got? Or did you remember how you felt? And it was so true. I'm like, wow, to be honest, I can't even remember like the toy that I got when I was 10 years old, but I remember the feeling and like the fun spirit that Christmas brought. And that's what it's about. So, even talking about the time and quality versus quantity, even when it comes to stuff like that too, just focus on the love and focus on how they feel and like how they feel secure and protected and confident and loved when they are with you. And that's the stuff that they're going to remember. And that's the thing that's most impactful, not how big or beautiful your house is, how many toys you have, those types of things. Those aren't the things that are going to be remembered.
You're so right. I remember, like, we didn't really celebrate Christmas. We celebrated New Year's. And what I remember is the smell of pine trees and fresh smell of oranges, because I called over there, I am from former Soviet Union. We didn't have all kind of food all year round. It was very seasonal. So usually we would get like oranges and mandarins around Christmas time. And so every kind of this time in December associated with the smell of pine trees and, peeling on the oranges and that smelling that citrusy skin. And that's how I remember kind of growing up. I don't remember the presents or the gifts, but that's kind of was a big holiday during the year. This was the biggest holidays, New Year Eve and New Year Day. And that's the memory.
I love that. And see, that's a thing. You remember those types of things. And I think that's so important to remember with our children as well, is like, that is what I know. There's a lot of people when they get divorced, especially like me, who went from, maybe a larger income because you have two people working, and then you have to adjust to another income, and you might have to take a few downgrades in life, or you're in your mind what you see as a downgrade, maybe move to a smaller place or not have as many things, and it takes a little bit of adjusting. And I know that there's some parents I've spoken to who have a really hard time wrapping their heads around that, and it's okay to acknowledge that, but also to remember too that that's not the stuff that your kids are going to remember. They're going to remember the feeling. That's what really matters. And just keeping that love and consistency. Who cares about the things, or that you're in a smaller house? It's, that stuff will eventually change, but don't wrap yourself and your identity too much to that stuff.
Yeah, so right. In the beginning, you also shared, how can you share some practical tips for women to start clearing the clutter in their bodies and minds?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that stands in the way of the ability to see clearly is making sure that we have a clean body. And it's not about perfection, but it's about cleaning up your environment and then cleaning up your diet. And now that I am in the holistic healthcare field, I see what a drastic role not only gut health plays in your cognitive function, but then also the toxins around you. And for so long, when I had a hard time grasping all of these concepts and being able to see clearly and being able to see things now and speak with such confidence as far as quality over quantity, and that you're not supposed to tie your self-worth to all these things. I would hear these things and my coach would say these things and they sounded great at the time, but it's like they weren't penetrating, and I was having such a hard time grasping it, but then I'd find myself really flustered so easily. And now as I began to see and understand the important role that gut health plays, and then also the toxins in your environment, I now understand why I was having such a hard time grasping those things. So for instance, our outside environment, endocrine disruptors, things from perfumes to those pretty scented candles from Bath and Body Works, things like that we're constantly most people are constantly surrounded with, disrupt our hormones, which then also disrupt our cognitive function. If we're not eating a proper diet, that will disrupt our gut microbiome, and our gut and our brain are very closely related. Everything goes back and forth between the vagus nerve there. And if there's disruption in gut dysbiosis, you are going to have a hard time being able to see things clearly. And so that's why I've become so passionate about that, about helping women clean up. So when it comes to just simple tips, simplicity is best. And this goes back to what we were just talking about a little while ago, the quality over the quantity. When it comes to ingredients in foods and then also in your products, the more that you see, the longer the list of all the ingredients that are in there. Don't be fooled by that. It doesn't mean that it's better or that it's good for you. Simplicity is best. It's about the quality, not quantity. So that little thing can be related to parenting, and then also to food and all of your products as well. And so rather than overcomplicating it, start simple. Fresh fruits and vegetables. Organic is best without any of the pesticides or anything like that on it. And cooking at home. Those are things that are simple and that will keep things nice and balanced. In terms of your environment, keeping things simple. I mean, to the point where skincare. Now, this may sound a little crazy and hippie. Some people might be saying this, but for my skincare routine, I use tallow on my face. So tallow is basically beef fat, but it actually moisturizes great, and it's been proven to reduce wrinkles. May sound really silly at first, but actually it's catching a lot of traction. A lot of people are doing it, and it's simplicity. It's one ingredient, that's it. And I put it on my skin, and it keeps me from all of the chemicals. Financially, it's a very, very inexpensive, and it's simplicity. So it's quality over the quantity. And so that would be my number one role, but or my number one pointer to people is just to start small and keep it really simple.
Yeah, you're right. So where do you get tallow from?
Tallow. So I actually get mine from Amazon. It is in kind of like a cute little jar. It's called Evil Goods. It's got a picture of like Marilyn Monroe on it. So it does look a little bougie. It's not just like straight up from like the butcher or anything like that. But it's very inexpensive. It's very simple ingredients, and it's not compromising my hormones. And it contributes again to my body's ability to be able to think clearly and to be able to have like those thoughts where I can adopt those things and they actually penetrate and they actually stick versus going in and they sound good, but then my body rejects it right away.
You're right. I love it. So you cut out a lot of stuff and you use natural products, and you're so right. Sometimes those names, like even not even cosmetology, but like ice cream or something, if they have those, like it should be just milk, sugar, and what is it, and eggs, like 3 ingredients. And sometimes you read the label and it's like such complicated names, and sometimes sugar is kind of labeled some other name and you think it's good for you, but it's not, really is not. So awesome, that you're so right, because environment does affect us, and it's not just what we put into our body, but also what we listen to, what we see, what we hear. It's all, environment plays a great role in who we become, who we show up as. And yeah, you're so right. What is your superpower if you had to pick one?
I would say these days it really is mindset and the ability to being able to turn things around in my mind fairly quickly. So looking back, of course, it's way easier to see things more clearly as you look back, because you're like, oh, I've already been through it. I've been past the worst of it. But life is a series of ups and downs. And so there's always going to be roadblocks. There's always going to be things that come up. But I feel like these days my superpower is that I'm able to switch that around very quickly. So now when I see a trial come up, I begin to see it as an opportunity. Okay, great. What is the lesson to learn here? What am I supposed to learn? And what's the really good thing that's going to come out of this? Because one thing that I have learned from my past is that every tough thing that I've been through, it has been a lesson learned, and there's always something better waiting at the end of it once I get past that lesson. And so being able to switch that pretty quickly, I would say, is my superpower. But a lot of that comes from, again, being balanced in other ways and keeping things as simple as possible so I can be able to see things really clearly.
Awesome. I love that. And you're so right. Mindset is a superpower because it gives us ability to see not just A or B, but we get to see different things. It's not everything is black and white. We get to see the complexities and the things in the life. And you're so right that we're constantly changing and evolving. So a problem that is, let's say, you're facing now, it might be difficult, but 6 months from now or a year from now, you're going to look at it and you're going to laugh at it. Like, why was this even a problem?
Yes. Exactly. And then you like learn and you're like, okay, that just like strengthened my muscles in like my brain muscles. It strengthened me, and it made me realize that like, okay, I can face whatever challenge is coming my way because I know I'm always going to be okay on the other side of it. And there's lessons to be learned in the middle of it. And it just builds my strength and resilience in the midst of it.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. Was there any book that inspired your journey that you can recommend?
Yes. One of the ones that I love, just because it ties everything together, what we're just talking about now, is The Body Keeps the Score. It talks about the mind-body connection and how if we don't process some of these hard emotions, how they manifest inside of the body, and how we've always thought about the body and the mind as two separate things, but the more that we begin to see them as one and how they all work together, that we can help our body to function the way that it was designed to, our body and our mind. And so it's a little bit of a sciencey book, but it's extremely fascinating. And I recommend people taking a look at that at some point.
I love that. You're so right. The body does keep the score. Sometimes we don't see it, and our body is sending signals to us. But if we ignore those signals, then the signals can become louder until there is a breakdown or there is something like a disease. So I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to put it on my list of things to read.
Yes.
Thank you. Is there anything I haven't asked that you would like to share?
No, I think we've covered everything, but I would just like to offer a little bit of encouragement, some words that, I wish I would have heard 8 years ago. But if you're finding yourself in the midst of this, hopefully some of those words I did say begin to resonate. The quality over the quantity is really what it's all about. But just as you listen to some of these stories, whether it be mine or other ones that you hear on this podcast, hopefully you can use that as inspiration. That I know you may be at rock bottom right now and you may be not understanding why this is happening to you. But the more that you can begin to shift that mindset and over time begin to see how this has all been happening for you and how this actually could be one of the biggest gifts that you will experience in life. And I know you may be thinking, how can this be a gift? Once you begin to walk through some of this and see it, you will begin to see on the other side that it was, and you'll also be able to see how strong and how resilient you became as a result of this. So just hang on, continue to keep trekking through and know that there is hope on the other side and you will get to it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. If people would like to connect with you or learn more about you, where would they go?
The best place is Instagram. So I can be found at lisamcgregor.ig. So it's pretty simple.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. We'll include it in episode notes. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your journey. And you're so right, like you mentioned many times, it's quality over quantity. Anything is possible. And thank you. Thank you for coming.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.